Good evening. Welcome to the Walpole Select Board meeting, regular meeting of Tuesday, November 7th. It is now past the time at 7. We'll 7:17. We apologize, but we will open this meeting if everyone could still stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda tonight is a presentation of Bird Pond Dam.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Doyle-Breen from AECOM. So I have a short presentation that I'll present on Bird Pond Dam. And I'll also just note that we have Rob Lowell and Bill Saloma from DCR here with us tonight as well. So if questions come up, there's a group of us to answer, as well as JP Manoir, who's our H&H engineer from AECOM. I'm the project manager for AECOM on the Abandoned Dams project, which includes Bird Pond Dam. So I have a relatively short slide deck that I'll go through relatively quickly so that we have time for questions. I'll be happy to go back onto anything in more detail. So here's the agenda of what I'm going to present. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the project, our evaluation approach to Bird Pond Dam, work that's been done to date, some supplemental work that we've done in the last couple of years, provide an update on that, talk about the cost breakdown of the alternatives, property ownership, permitting, and next steps for Bird Pond Dam. So Bird Pond Dam is part of the DCR Abandoned Dams program. There are other dams in the state. We're obviously here to talk about Bird Pond here in Walpole tonight. All of these dams have no identifiable owner, so DCR is stepping in and as a pilot program trying to evaluate a path forward for abandoned dams in general in the state, of which there are more than just these 6. The general evaluation approach for these abandoned dams is to start with some initial municipal outreach, which DCR and AECOM did do with Walpole a few years ago, and then to do a phase 2 investigation of the dam's status, develop alternative concepts. In general, we look at 3 alternatives for each dam, including Bird Pond Dam: repairing it, removing it, or partially removing it so that it's no longer a jurisdictional dam. After that assessment is done, DCR's goal is to engage the community to talk about and get input on what the community wants for the dam. So it's very much an interactive process. It's not just DCR saying this is what's going to happen. And that's why we're here tonight, to get some input from the city of Walpole. And in general, if a community wants a dam to stay and the repair alternative is chosen, DCR does require that there be a municipal commitment to achieving property ownership, because DCR is not really in a position to own or take ownership of these dams. But repairs would be implemented by DCR and paid by DCR before turning the dam over to the municipality. But given no municipal interest, generally speaking, DCR will pursue full or partial removal. So the phase 2 investigation looked at all the things listed here. I won't read all of this list, but basically it looked at the existing condition of the dam, whether it was safe, whether it was stable, and what would need to be done if it was not safe and stable to have those conditions exist. So looking at Bird Pond Dam, one of the things to note about the dam is that it does impound the Neponset River. It's a very large watershed. Just over 25 square miles, so there's a lot of water that comes into the dam area, into the impoundment. The results of the phase 2 investigation for Bird Pond Dam are shown here. It's a combined earth and embankment, stone and concrete structure dam. It's just over 18 feet tall, 430 feet long, and it impounds just under 300 acre-feet of water. The dam was found to be in an unsafe condition. It's an intermediate size, high hazard dam. And there had been noted in the past that there were issues with seepage as well as trespassers. And the businesses immediately downstream are impacted by the condition of the dam. One of the key things with the Bird Pond Dam to keep in mind as I'm going through the rest of the slides is that the spillway channel that comes out of the dam goes below those buildings immediately downstream, so it really limits options for what can be done at this site. And that channel only can convey the 100-year storm. And it would be very difficult to change that because of the infrastructure in place on top of that channel. So to date, as I mentioned, the phase 2 investigation was completed. And after that, like I said, there were some seepage concerns. There were also some public safety concerns. As a result, a fence was installed. In 2021, we did a preliminary design report that looked at rehabilitating the dam and rehabilitating the spillway and armoring it so that when it was overtopped during the spillway design flood, it would still be stable. And also, the preliminary design report looked at addressing the seepage issues. After that, we did some additional sediment characterization because sediment management can be a really big driver of costs with these dam projects. And then most recently, we've looked at some supplemental alternatives analysis, which I'll go over the results of that in just a minute. The results of the sediment sampling were that there were a few samples that had exceedances for MCP standards for lead, but they were pretty minor, and in general, the sediment is not very impacted, and it seems likely that the sediments could remain in place without there being a need to address any sort of elevated chemical parameters. This slide is just to orient you as to a couple of features of the site that I'm going to refer to on the next few slides. I don't think I have a pointer, but you can see there the dam on the left-hand side of the, maybe I can use my mouse. No, I can't. Well, where the red star is, that's labeled as location 1, that's the top of the dam. To the right, you see the existing infrastructure that's present. The blue star is in the parking lot, and just keep those two locations in mind because I'm going to talk about a flood risk analysis, basically, that pertains to those two locations. But you can see by this figure what I was mentioning before, those buildings, that existing infrastructure is immediately downstream of the dam, and you can see the white thread of the stream that goes underneath the water course that goes underneath those buildings, which, as I mentioned, only conveys the 100-year storm. So that's very much a limitation, as limits what can be done here to address concerns with the dam. So we did, like I mentioned, we did a supplemental alternatives analysis. We looked at multiple scenarios. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'm going to highlight the existing conditions, a dam breach scenario, and then a complete removal scenario. And we looked, you can see here, we looked at a very large number of scenarios. But those are the three, which I'll show you the summary of in the next slide, that sort of bookend the range of conditions we could expect to see, depending on what alternative was selected. And we looked at, we applied a methodology that was developed by the Bureau of Reclamation, which evaluates flood risk or flood danger for pedestrians based on looking at both flood depth and flood velocity. So this slide summarizes the result of that analysis. The first row is existing conditions. The second row is a scenario of breaching the dam, which involves breaching down to an elevation of 90 over most of the length of the dam, and then having a 10% slide slope on either end of the dam up to the existing slopes. And then the spillway removal scenario looks at removing the existing spillway down to elevation 86, but the dam embankment itself would remain in place as it is now at the current elevation of 102. The colors on this slide are representing what you can see in the legend at the bottom. Again, as I mentioned, we used a Bureau of Reclamation methodology to look at risk of flooding for a pedestrian that would be standing at one of two locations. Those were the 2 red stars on that slide that I showed a few slides ago. So on the left-hand side, the furthest left column shows the scenario, flood depth for those same storm events. Using the methodology that I mentioned, looks at the depths, which are shown here, as well as the velocities. So there is a difference in risk if you just have stagnant, so to speak, water versus flowing water. The ones that are highlighted in yellow have velocities that are more than 0, but not high enough that we would put them in the high danger zone. So those are the ones that are keyed with the yellow. The ones in red are, for those scenarios, the combination of the depth that you see there, as well as the velocity, is that those are high danger situations for a pedestrian standing either on top of the dam or in the parking lot. So the take-home message from this slide is if you look at the existing conditions and then you compare it to the dam breach scenario, in a nutshell, you see more colors. So things are getting worse if we look at breaching the dam down to elevation 90. The lowest row, which is the scenario of removing the spillway down to elevation 86, but keeping the embankment in place, you can see is actually an improvement over existing conditions. Again, just like a quick visual, there's fewer colors there and there is no red color. And one thing to note is that, in terms of the improvement, for the 500-year flood, you can see under existing conditions on that top row, there is some flood, there's some overtopping of the dam to a depth of 1.3 feet of water on top of the dam, and it's moving at a velocity that is more than 0 and enough that it gives us some concern, but it's not all the way in the judgment zone. And then when you look at the spillway removal scenario at the bottom, you can see that conditions are improved for the 500-year flood. The depth has gone to 0. And then also for the 500-year flood what I just said pertains to the location on top of the dam. But even looking at the parking lot, you can see that top row has a depth of 4 feet and fast-moving water in the parking lot under current conditions. But if the spillway were removed, you can see that the depth of water in the parking lot has decreased a little bit, and more importantly, the velocity has decreased quite a bit so that it's no longer in that high danger zone. I know that's sort of a lot of information. I want to get through the rest of the slides, but we're happy to go back and talk about those results more if anybody would like to discuss them more. So just again, in summary, there are a lot of hydraulic limitations to what can be done out at this site. There's the undersized culvert that I mentioned. It's a very large watershed, as I mentioned. There's the development, the buildings immediately downstream of the dam. There's also downstream of Bird Pond Dam, the Washington Street Bridge, which creates a backwater. And so, our conclusion after looking at all of these scenarios and those numbers that I just showed you in the table is that the best scenario to reduce flood risk in the area immediately downstream of the dam is that the embankment should stay in place. If you remove it altogether, that middle row of that last table show that conditions are worse in terms of flood risk. But the scenario of removing the spillway down to elevation 86 does provide benefits over the current situation. Doing that would create basically a dry pool. It would, removing the spillway would essentially mean that instead of having an impoundment of water, it would be a stream channel where the Bird Pond is now, and I have a figure in a minute that will show that. And that dry pool reduces risk to the greatest extent possible. And again, it improves conditions over a wide range of flows. And there would be no concern for a dam break during quote unquote sunny day. I'm not gonna say everything that's on this slide, but one of the reasons we're here tonight is to share the results I just went over quickly and get the town's input on the recommended approach that we see, which is that the dam embankment does need to stay in place, but that it's beneficial to remove the spillway and create a dry impoundment. Even doing that, the dam would still require some repairs because it would still be overtopped during the spillway design flood, which is higher than the 500-year flood. So those repairs would include putting an impervious blanket and adding some stability for the dam. And there would be some structural improvements, stability improvements that would be needed as well. This is just to give you a visual of what it would look out there if the spillway were removed. The green basically represents upland wooded area, and the blue would be the stream that would be present. So it would transform what is out there now of a view of an impoundment into a stream. And then, what happened adjacent to the stream is something that could be discussed. It could be, revegetated. The elevations there look to us like they're high enough that it would not be a wetland. They go up pretty quickly, actually, looking at the bathymetry. So it's likely that it would be more of a dry floodplain type of habitat. This is a cost breakdown of the alternatives. This is just to give you an idea, and I know those numbers are sort of hard to read. I know I can't read them, but I can read them off to you. So just repairing the dam and basically leaving it like it is would be less expensive. It would be $3.9 million, approximately. Again, these are based on 2023 numbers. And the alternative of repairing the dam but then adding the component of the spillway removal that I just explained is actually more expensive, just under $4.5 million. But even though it's more expensive, DCR's initial feeling, again, absent input from the municipality, is that would be the preferred approach for reducing flood risk. And then we did reconfirm ownership this past spring. We had a surveyor go out and mark the parcels. Most of the dam is on parcel 2D that is owned by Lloyd Marded, who does not seem to exist. So that's why this is identified as an abandoned dam. There is some of the embankment and the retaining walls on parcel 2B, which is owned by the Hogan Family Realty Trust. There are a lot of permits that would be needed to implement the spillway removal. So, I'm not going to read through all these, but the point of this slide is just to say that there's a long permitting road ahead if this were to move forward with the spillway removal, including MIPA and a number of other permits that you can see listed here. So, in conclusion, having the dam in place does reduce the risk of flood impacts to the downstream businesses and infrastructure. Based on the reasons I just explained, DCR's preferred approach is to remove the spillway and operate a dry dam and have the ability for a dry impoundment to exist. So it would reduce risk. DCR would fund and implement the repair design and all those permits I just went through and the construction. This approach, DCR's approach has been that, and I'll let Bill Saloma from DCR make a comment on this, about the ownership. Like I mentioned, DCR isn't really in a position to take ownership of parcels, so that is something that on other dams we've worked with the municipalities on. Bill, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. At the moment, as we understand it, DCR doesn't have eminent domain power sufficient to just make a decision and take the land. And one of the principles of our pilot project is to try to work with communities to come up with a solution to put the property that we need to execute the work into public ownership. And we would ask the community to consider taking the parcel for non-payment of taxes. If you chose to see the impoundment restored and the dam completely repaired, we would expect to negotiate to a resolution that the town would be the owner post-project. If we are able to get the project into public ownership, the town, and we effect the spillway removal and the removal of the pond, then most likely it would revert back to DCR to maintain in the future, unless the town was interested in partnering somehow with us to accomplish that over time. So there's a little bit of negotiation and discussion to have about securing land rights before this project can move forward, but we're okay spending money on private abandoned assets for the purpose of enhancing public safety for all the services that Jen spoke about, the design, permitting, and preparation of everything we need to go to construction. We just can't construct unless the parcel is owned publicly. So that's to be worked on.
Yeah, and with that, I think that concludes our presentation. Like I said, we're happy to answer questions, and again, we're here tonight to, seek concurrence with the town of Walpole and hear your thoughts. Again, I think Bill would agree that DCR isn't here mandating something be done. This is the start of the discussion.
All right, thank you. I'm going to open this up to the board to begin questions. Glenn?
Yeah, hi, thank you for the presentation. That was very informative, and I was glad to sit through it. I know the dam well. I live walking distance from it. I live on Pinnacle Drive, and I've been there probably 50 times, so I know exactly what you're talking about rings true. So I certainly understand why it needs to be replaced, and I understand the how, the options, and I understand your preference for the spillway removal. I think one of my questions for you is, if you could help me with this, is sort of what happens, what's the practical result as we return this to its natural, the way it was before there was ever a dam built there, and to its original condition. Certainly that's the preference from an environmental standpoint, but now there are 26 homes on a couple side streets there. There's in one of your slides, the Riverwalk condominiums directly overlook it. Is there, I would want to address concerns before, I would want to have answers to questions before they were even asked about, would it be a mucky, smelly, sort of, in some ways it's good to restore that original environmental condition, but people live there now, and if the answer, and then depending on what the answer is, if the answer is yes, it would be a mucky, smelly mess, is there anything we could do to alleviate that? Is there, and then where would that money come from? Could DCR help us fund, assuming, depending on what your answer is, I can let you actually answer it, but depending on what the answer is, could you help us sort of, make it more desirable, more of a destination, not a destination, but a place where that could be used as an outdoor space and an improvement in all cases?
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take a stab at answering that first? Yeah. So I think the first answer is that, again, I mentioned this, I went over everything pretty quickly, but we have looked at the bathymetry of the pond and considered, therefore, what the elevations of the land would be if the impoundment were lowered and that land was exposed compared to the elevation of the stream channel. And looking at that, I don't think it would be a wetland, which probably corresponds to, your comments about having something that's mucky and smelly. The elevations out there, again, based on our initial look, are 2 to 3 feet above the stream channel, and wetland hydrology is supported, typically either from surface water or groundwater, but you would expect that the groundwater would be somewhat analogous to the stream level. So having those ground elevations 2 or 3 feet above it, usually a wetland has groundwater within a foot of the surface. So it's a bit higher. So I don't think it would be, a wetland that's very mucky. It could be, it would be floodplain, I think. So, when there's a storm, it might flood, and it would provide, which would be a benefit for providing flood storage. But I would think that it would be more of an upland area that's dry most of the time. That's my initial thought from what we've looked at so far. We could certainly look at that in more detail. That parcel, I sort of skipped over this when we were on the slide about the ownership. The entire impoundment, as many of you may know, is privately owned by LA Parisi Trust with a trustee. So, I think whatever happened in the future on that parcel would be somewhat dependent on what that landowner would be amenable to, and we have not reached out to them.
Well, to clarify, the pond itself is owned by, I think, the Neponset River Watershed Holding.
I don't believe so.
Is that privately held, the pond?
That's my understanding from looking at the assessor's maps.
Okay, that's good to know. So if we wanted to, just to your earlier comment,
Yep.
create a sort of shoreline.
Yep.
You know, rock ledge, and could we add, or could you add?
Yeah.
A shoreline that, you know, a rocky
Higher,
sort
yeah,
of place to go, that, you know, instead of mud.
Right.
And I think I'm thinking of what I saw in Norwood, over at the Trout, is it Trout Brook? Or, they recently removed a spillway, I think, and I've only driven by it. I haven't actually gotten out and looked at it, but from what I've
Yep.
seen, they had diggers and backhoes out there, and they were moving ledge around, and they
Yep.
created a sort of a shore.
Yep.
You know, a channel.
Yeah, I think that's an option that could be explored. Again, you know, I don't, in terms of who would pay for that, I think that's something that would have to be discussed with
I
DCR.
think DCR is committed to trying to pay for as much as we can to make it a successful project, except where we have that intersection of private property.
Right.
So that could be a limitation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Jim?
So just picking up on the thread that Glenn was on, and the mucky mess in particular, so that place is going to continue to flood, you know, when we have storms.
Big storms,
of
yep.
any kind of magnitude. And that's what we want, because we don't want the downstream to be affected. So part of your plan is to take the spillway down, leave the dam in place. It's probably the least expensive option, and it allows us to continue to use the earthen dam part, you know, to control the flood risk downstream, which is all good. The question does stick in my head of every time it floods, do you get the mucky mess? So even if you were to, say, define a shoreline and do, you know, some interesting things there, I could imagine that if you've got a lot of flow coming into that stream, that whatever has been defined as the edge might get washed away and into the stream, and it probably just turns into a mishmash.
Yeah.
And,
yeah,
and so
sorry.
I just would like to hear more about, you know, what can we expect there? Because if it does turn into a mucky mess, and I like that term, by the way, and you said it right, we don't think it will, but what if it does? And you got mosquitoes, and you've got smells of various kinds, and all that. You've got people who have houses on both sides down there that would be affected by that. And I'd just be interesting to think ahead a little bit to say, if that were to happen now, what would you do to mitigate that?
I mean, I think one of the most important things to mitigate the potential for that happening, like you just said, is to think about that possibility and incorporate what we can into the design so that doesn't happen. I would say that we're really at the beginning of the design process, but we can think about things that we could do to like armor the stream and look at elevations. And I don't know, I'm going to turn to JP. I don't know if we've evaluated, I know we've looked at the water above the dam, but I'm not sure we know which storm events would result in impoundment, like water in the impoundment still, have we?
I mean, in terms of storm event, maybe at a low level, but the area that would be inundated on the larger storm event can be stabilized with both vegetation or rock or some other material which could be attractive when it is not flooded, but to stabilize the bank. So it's a matter of engineering
Yes.
a solution for it.
Yep. So I think, again, there are things that we can think about and incorporate into the design and the engineering of it. But like Bill mentioned, I think one of the things we have to, I don't know if hurdle is the right word, but we need to engage the private landowner, and whatever is done would have to be agreeable to them.
Well, I would imagine the private landowners would want something done because they'd be the ones most affected.
Yep.
So my guess is there'll be cooperation there. At least I would
Yep.
hope that'd be the case. But it's the sort of the continual effect that I'm worried about. You get the 10-year storm or whatever, and it's big, and you get 20 inches of rain in 2 days, and it's flowing down there and going crazy. And you think about things like erosion. That stream bed is defined in your picture as meandering around, but it's going to erode when you start getting a lot of flow in there, I would think. you know, yes, the velocity is down, but it won't be down when there's a 10-year flood. It'll be coming in there fast and furious, I would think.
Yeah.
And so I'd be worried about erosion and where does that erosion go and what other impacts are going to happen. I'm just trying to think ahead to
Yep.
say, when we get on the other side of the project,
Yep.
what are all the bad things that are going to happen?
Yeah, and I think all those scenarios are things we would look at during the design, the different storm events, and we are working on another project, a dam removal project right now, where that's exact issue has come up. So we're doing geotechnical testing, making sure, looking at the shear strength of the soils and figuring out how steep the banks can be, if they need to be armored, what vegetation we're, like, all of that would be part of the design. We just aren't quite there yet on Bird Pond, but I think that's something that we would definitely incorporate into the design, again, pending agreement with the landowner.
And let's talk about the ownership aspect again now. So you take the spillway down, the dam stays in place, and I think what you're saying, in order for you to do the construction, we would have to take some kind of eminent domain action, like, you know, against those parcels that have been abandoned. Are there,
The dam parcel itself, which is different than the impoundment parcel. Yeah, the dam is on its own
Right,
parcel.
right.
Yep, exactly.
So those parcels that are privately owned or owned by trusts today, we would theoretically take control of through an eminent domain action. You would then do the work. Now you're done and you go away. Who has the ongoing maintenance cost? Because there has to be
Yeah, there
ongoing
will be.
maintenance.
Yeah, there will be.
And what are those costs?
Yeah, I get, I can answer maybe part of it, then maybe Bill can chime in. I mean, when the dam, again, not only would the spillway be removed, but the dam itself would be repaired. And, you know, the design life of that repair, we would expect would be at least 50 years, if not more. And the maintenance would be somewhat minimal, but there is definitely maintenance, you're right. Mowing, you know, making sure the spillway is, you know, not clogged with debris, that, you know, that sort of thing. In terms of, I think the second part of your question was, yeah, who would ultimately be responsible for that O&M? I think that is something that it would be part of a negotiation with DCR.
Yeah, we have to work
and-
that out.
Yeah.
Did I hear that if we want to repair the dam, that you really want us to take ownership, but if you remove the spillway, you would retain ownership? Did I understand that comment?
Not,
Well, that might be
Control.
likely, but
Yeah.
I would hope that we could come to a negotiated.
It seemed like one was more like, has to, if we
Oh,
repair,
yes.
you have to take it.
Yeah,
But
if there's gonna be an
yeah.
impoundment there that needs ongoing supervision,
Right.
maintenance, et cetera, on an ongoing basis, we really need a public entity
I
that's
understand.
responsible for that kind of operation and
Okay.
responsibility.
Wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
I just need to make sure we understand that, so that, because we're gonna have to plan for it. And if, you know, you tell me it's gonna be $1 million a year to maintain the thing, which I'm throwing that number out, and understanding it's not the right number, but you get my point, that would be a significant impact to us. And if there were, you know, again, thinking ahead, not just the day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year maintenance, but what if something happens that requires that we do something above and beyond that? You know, does the state offer any kind of assistance there? I really think we need to understand all those things, because dams can be very costly things and are very risky.
yeah, I think those are all discussions that DCR and the town would have together. So I think those are things that, in terms of, if the spillway were removed but the embankment stayed in the future, you know, I think that's something that DCR would discuss with the municipality about who ultimately
Yeah.
owns that embankment
We would try to
long-term.
configure such a dam that maintenance would be easy.
Okay?
Mowing, the hardest part, if there's any riprap that we leave for armor.
Yep.
That would probably require manual clipping on an annual basis. And the thing about, you guys own a few dams.
Yeah, we do.
The thing about taking care of dams is keeping up with it. You
Yep.
don't let it get, you don't defer the maintenance.
Right.
'Cause that's gonna cost you many times more. So I don't see that the dry dam condition, that would hopefully be able to be done with town forces or if you hire contractors. For similar dams, we don't spend any more than, depending upon the size of the dam, $5,000 to $10,000 a year on routine maintenance.
Gotcha. Okay. that's helpful.
And
So-
I would think we could probably write up a little summary, if, again, we're just opening this
Yeah.
discussion tonight, but if it continues, we could put together like a one-page summary of what might be anticipated for O&M and so that you would have that information in front of you before making any sort of final decision.
Yeah. Let's just start at the very beginning now and
Yep.
talk about the risk of the current structure. So the do-nothing risk. And what I'm really concerned about is that dam at risk of collapse?
That dam is not in good condition. So, and then another thing I like to just leave with people, to put things in perspective, if DCR wasn't doing this, I don't think anybody was gonna do it.
Right.
We wouldn't expect anybody
Right.
else to do it. So I think it speaks volumes to the administration that was convinced to allow dam safety to do this. They had the same perspective, because there was no reply to that other than, yeah, that makes sense. So,
Well, where I was going with the question is I want to kind of get you and us on record to say the do-nothing, regardless of the 150 or 500-year flood scenarios, just the day-to-day, if you didn't even have a flood scenario, we've got risk in that dam, I believe.
yeah.
Yep.
And so the
Timeline.
So the do-nothing approach really isn't, it's not a choice.
Yep, I think DCR would,
No, and in the
Feels the same
meantime,
way.
we're continually out there
Yeah.
keeping an eye on things.
Yep, good.
We put the fence up to keep kids out of the spillway, which was a scary sight. Kids were playing around in that spillway, believe it or not.
Really, yeah.
And if we see something happen that needs addressing, we're gonna do that.
but yeah.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think the need is clear. We can't continue to do nothing. We've been talking about this for 20 years, by the way, probably longer than that. But the do-nothing approach is not a choice. It's too risky in its current state. What you're suggesting to reduce the spillway, and I'm no expert on this stuff, but reading through your materials and listening to tonight's discussion, that seems like the most rational approach because it preserves the earthen dam, which prevents the downstream flooding in the 100-year flood.
Yep.
So I think that does make a lot of sense. So I'm completely in agreement with the direction you're taking us in. I just want to make sure we understand the totality of the costs, the fullness of the picture, the impacts to the residents, and that in our next conversation, I'd like to think that you'd come back and talk to us about some of that so that we can start to, figure out where, first of all, where we have risk, financial risk I'm talking about, and so that we can be taking whatever actions are required, hopefully with you guys, to resolve that while we mitigate the structural risk of this dam.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense,
Okay,
I think.
all right. Thanks, Ally.
Another important thing I'd like to add is it'd be great if we could count on town support when we reach out to people that are going to be interested in this project. Because we do have to go on a campaign to sell it to people.
Yeah.
Get them to buy into it.
Well, you could imagine some of the feedback that we would expect to hear if I lived there. I've got this water feature right now that's going to be reduced to a stream.
Yep,
Forget all the mucky mess thing, I'm losing the water feature.
yep.
So I could see how thered be some concern over that, and yet, public safety obviously has to trump that.
Right, yeah, I think it's a matter of education,
Yeah.
Educating people about why, like you said, the do-nothing action is really not an option. It's
Not a
not
choice.
safe, and that's why DCR is stepping in to make it safe.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to jump in, just on that last comment, I've taken an informal poll to a couple of my neighbors, and there's initial resistance, and I think it's probably because they don't have any information, right?
Yep.
So do nothing for them is the best option, because they know what do nothing is.
Yep.
So there needs to be an education campaign, which is what
Yep.
you just said, but it needs to let them know that it will be better, and it actually should be better, right? So the result should be better than what they currently have, and they should be educated about that. So, thank you.
Yeah, so I would just say, I agree, I think you're on the right track, we appreciate you coming in. I do think the removal of the spillway is the way to go. I would ask if Jim or Carl has any questions or comments that we should be thinking about as well.
No, I don't see, I think Jim raised a lot of good points, but
Yeah.
I also don't see an issue with us being supportive of their efforts, advertising on our social media, websites, getting the word out and everything, using the message boards if necessary. But ultimately, we've known this dam is a problem for a while. I agree with Jim's statement that doing nothing is really not an option. This is a good, we don't have to expend capital on this. We may have to spend some time if we have to go down and do the tax title taking, but we have attorneys, we've done plenty of those before in the past, so if that's the route the board decides to go, I'm not worried about, that whole process and everything. We've done it before. Carl?
Good evening, Carl Baldoff, Town Engineer, and simply stated, I agree with what Jim just said. I agree with you, Member O'Neill, and I'm in support of this. I really like what the Office of Dam Safety is doing, and through their consultants, what they proposed here. I'm 100% in moving forward with that. And we own 4 dams in varying condition that are regulated. Really, the biggest cost I see that we spend is on doing the updates for the emergency action plans and the dam inspections. The actual on-the-ground maintenance is pretty minimal. So, looking forward, I don't think you have a lot to be, there's always devil in the details type of thing here, but, that's my perspective. I really think this is an excellent program and an opportunity.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I guess I would just simply add, I should have started this way, to thank you for coming in and presenting this to us, and I really do appreciate the fact that the state is stepping in and, taking on what is a potentially very serious problem for us. So I think it's something that's worth saying, and we look forward to working with you.
My only other question was the timeline. So obviously you've received some input, and I think the board supports the idea that there needs to be action taken. So what is the next time frame and timeline that we're looking for?
Yeah, we haven't put together a detailed schedule, but in general, I would say it's a few years away, because we have to, we haven't done all the design yet. We definitely have some things to look at, as was mentioned, with the stabilization of the stream channel and incorporating those into the design components, and some outreach and getting the abutters on. All that takes a bit of time, and then we have that whole permitting process to go through, which I mentioned, including MIPA, which by itself takes about a year. And then, all those other permits that are listed up there, those state permits can't be issued until after MIPA. So at least a couple of years. We don't have a detailed schedule yet, but a few years.
Okay.
And if I could, but what I think I heard is during that period, you're keeping a very close eye on it.
Yep.
And, I assume if it started to have some issue, that we would take more immediate action.
We'll be addressing any issues that come up.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
All right, well, we appreciate you coming here and this information, and we look forward to working, because I think this is a great opportunity for the town to work with DCR and find some improvements for this dam.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, really appreciate it.
Concerning the dam?
Yes.
At this time, generally, we don't open it up.
We can meet
We
with
do have
you.
open forum coming up, so.
We do have open forum coming up, so if you'd like to stay, I'll open up the open forum. Put your questions on record. As this is a multi-year plan, there'll certainly be many opportunities for public input. And this is, so we're going to open up public forum, so I certainly would invite you to come up and speak and put. Yep, and just as soon as we kind of get everything ready, and to come up and speak, and it will be a process, and there certainly will be outreach to anyone who is abutting or impacted.
I'd like to ask them, they should catch them on the way out.
Yeah. So it is past the time of 7:35, which is our posted open forum. So if there's anyone that would like to speak at open forum, I invite you to come up and state your name.
Well, it was just, there was no talk of.
So if you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic and just stating your name for record?
Martin Hogan, 153 Washington Street. On the plans, it was apparent that the biggest risk for removing the dam is between Washington Street and the existing dam. Well, that's us. So the flood, removing puts us in the red, the flood zone, in the above average flood zone for the big storms. There was no talk on floodwater management. Is it possible, like Hollingsworth and Vose controls their dam further down, when there's gonna be a large rainstorm, they dump the river so they can accumulate the water slowly and protect the people downstream from them. There was a study done by GZA 10 years ago, because like you said, we've been kicking this ball down the road for a long time, that if our dam failed and Hollingsworth's dam failed, South Norwood's going underwater. So I just, I'm here looking to protect us. I saw we're in the greatest risk if they remove that dam now. You know, is there anything we can do to see a new dam goes back in place?
Would you like to own the new dam?
I would not. Okay. Thank you.
Because that would be the issue. The town doesn't really want to own a dam. I'll state my opinion.
Talk to the guy that owns the property.
Somebody owns it, but
Yes.
nobody knows who it is. Some people may. But nobody is admitting that they own the dam.
Yes.
So, as a board, we're looking for risk mitigation, the greatest number of people, the downstream thing.
Yep.
My suggestion is if you want to write up some of your questions, you can send them to the select board office, and we can forward them on to the state to consider. It sounds like that may work for you, so.
Okay. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else here this evening that would like to come forward and speak in the open forum?
Okay, my name is Tony McKetty. I live on Common Street. I have an apartment building there, right where the bridge is, going toward the high school. And I'm here tonight really because my tenants have been complaining, and other people in the neighborhood also, of the heavy trucks coming down and how fast they're coming down Common Street. This is coming down the hill, okay, and very noisy and very early in the morning. They start around 5:45, 20 minutes to 6 in the morning, because I live there. I reside in the building myself too, so I hear them. And I know it's a business and they have things they have to do and the time is important. But is the town, is it 6 o'clock before heavy trucks, is there any time limit on that in the town of Walpole? No. All right, that's another problem too. They've made Common Street into a truck route now. I was never notified they were going to do that, but I noticed the signs on Main Street, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or a year ago, and I noticed they have signs up now when you're coming from Rentham into Walpole Center, that's a truck route. And it's very noisy. It sounds like a war zone, matter of fact, coming over, when they reach the bridge coming down the hill. And they're going kind of fast. Not kind of, they are going over the speed limit. Now, I know maybe the town is limited as what they can do about this here. But I was thinking, as a person who lives on the street, the speed limit in front of the high school, is anybody aware what it is? Is it 30 miles an hour in front of the high school, or 20, 25? I've seen it, but I've forgotten now exactly what it is. But maybe there should be not only a speed limit sign put on the top of the hill when you're coming down the hill toward the center over that bridge, but also maybe some kind of a sign, a speed indicator indicating to people how fast they're going. So they have a double reminder. Not only they have a speed limit, but they have a reminder how fast they really are going. Okay, and these are heavy trucks. the trucks that are carrying, some of the trucks are, most of them, the heaviest and the noisiest are the ones who are hauling sand and gravel, okay? Because they're really big, heavy trucks. And also, there are trucks that are hauling heavy-duty equipment, construction equipment, steam shovels, so forth and so on. They come down pretty often on that street, up and down that street. Now, if you don't live on that street, that's fine, but most of us, wherever we live, we want to live in a residential area, we want it to be fairly quiet, we expect some traffic. And I accept school buses, that's education, school, that's important. But these are businesses, and they should have to, I believe, abide by, we should have some kind of laws for them as the time, a time in the morning. If they come down, they can't come down there at a certain time. And it has to be a decent time, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, not 6 or coming down there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And so the people living on that street, some of them have jobs. They're not at 9 to 5 jobs. They're not, they may work during the night, they may sleep in the morning, and this annoys them. They wake up, they're very, very loud. So I'm here just to file my complaint, I guess, and let the town know, is there anything they can do about this? That's about it. And I have another gentleman here that lives on Common Street, like to talk.
Certainly.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Kerry Herzig. I live on Lower Common, number 74. First of all, I moved here 7 years ago. I love this town, and I love being part of this procedure tonight where I actually get to say something. I have a couple of manhole covers in front of my house. I live in a brick house. I live in the Georgian Colonial across from the old library. And when these trucks that Mr. McKetty is talking about hit those, it sounds like a bomb is going off, and my brick house vibrates. Now, I have contacted DPW, and they were kind enough to come out and actually put some tar or whatever it is over those, but it hasn't really improved it much. I don't have a solution. However, I will back up what Mr. McKetty said 110%. These trucks are coming at 5:55 in the morning. I don't know if right now it's 6, but bang! It's going off like a, did you call it a war zone? It's extremely noisy.
Heavy trucks.
They're tractor trailers, right? I don't know why my street is a truck zone. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's what the town has chosen to do. It seems like 27, which I assume is state-funded somewhat, would be a better truck zone, but I'm not trying to put my problems off on somebody else. The other thing, too, is, and again, right, selfishly, I don't want them on my street, but not in my backyard, right? But on Common Street, just think, as a community here, think about the things that we've got on that street, i.e. the high school. I also live next door to a house that houses mentally challenged senior citizens. I also live next to 2 funeral homes where people are frequently standing in line and parking, trying to park. It's very busy as it is. If there's anything we could do to potentially mitigate the amount of, again, I think it's just tractor trailers, heavy-duty trucks, right? I get UPS has to deliver my stuff and has to deliver your stuff, so does Amazon. But if there's anything we could possibly do, and I'm happy to participate in a think tank or whatever it's called these days, to maybe come up with a solution where we might be able to at least take some of the traffic elsewhere or something, right? I'm not a know-it-all. I don't know how to solve every problem, but I'm happy to participate in something that we could do to help make our neighborhood a little bit safer, quieter, and more livable. Any questions from you guys?
Jim,
I know you usually don't comment, but 2 things. You had asked what the speed limit is. It's posted. We just found it online. In front of the school, it's 20 miles an hour. Down near the old library, it's 35 miles an hour. We just looked that up on Google Maps. I would suggest, usually this board, as the road commissioners, oversee everything, but generally, you don't act unless you receive something from the police chief, and we asked the town engineer to look it over. I think the appropriate place to start would be with the police department. Our office, we had, for some reason, Aoife had heard about this might be coming, we have received no complaints about zero to date up until this evening about truck traffic along Common Street. But I think the most appropriate place would be I can connect these two gentlemen with Chief Kelleher. You can have a sit-down with, I think it's Officer Parlon, who's his traffic safety officer, and they can see what's out there. We can certainly see about putting some of those, flashing speed limit signs that we have out there to start helping out in the process.
Yeah, it seems like we'd also actually do traffic enforcement. You know, if the speed limits that you're talking about, sounds like they're going above those. So the police chief could, figure out how to do some traffic enforcement there and slow things down a little bit. I would also so I agree with what you've suggested, Jim. I think I'd like to know that that's going to happen in the very near future so that, we're actually being responsive to the feedback we're getting here tonight.
We certainly appreciate you coming tonight. This is the first time it's come to our board with a complaint of the noise, the traffic, and such of that. Being in a forum, we do not get into a discussion about it, but I think starting with our police chief, and it has been noted now, and then we can move forward with hopefully some more information, and whether it's traffic control, some data from the police department to see.
Fantastic. And of course, I wasn't hopeful that something would happen overnight. I was here earlier today, and Patrick and Aoife were nice enough to suggest the very same thing that you folks have come up with. So I'm happy to grab Tony and speak to whomever at the police office, and we'll take the appropriate steps to try to help do whatever we can to make it more livable, especially for Common Street, which granted is my home, but I think it's the nicest street in Walpole.
It is a nice street.
It's a nice street.
You have a nice home,
Yeah.
too.
So thank you all for what you do, and thanks for having us tonight.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that is everyone who is here for open forum at this time. So we can move on to new business. The first item is a vote to award a bid for Blackburn Hall Services. Are there any other updates for this, Jim?
Sure, no, this is something that was appropriated back at the fall annual town meeting in 2022. Donnie's been picking away with some of these funds. We appropriated $420,000 to do some improvements to Blackburn, but we wanted to get someone in here to look at not only at the roof, which Don did, I think it was last summer, but also some of the one of the uses for this building. So we've gotten a proposal here from RMD Collaborative of a not-to-exceed fee of $15,000, which is well within the $420,000 that was appropriated. So I recommend favorable action for bid contract number 24-01, Blackburn Hall Architectural Services.
All right, does anyone on the board have any comments or questions? Nope, then Ben?
I would make a motion to award bid contract 2024-01 to RMD Collaborative LLC.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have a vote, 500. Next item on new business is the renewal of the following license categories issued by the select board.
Sure, so I can take this one. So this is all the licenses that the board issued that are not alcohol. So it's just a way, we've started all the renewal campaigns, but this will just allow me some time so I can get these processed and out the door while I'm working on the alcohol. I'll bring those forward to you probably the first meeting in December.
Does anyone on the board have any questions on any of these renewals?
Nope.
I'd make a motion to renew the weekday and Sunday entertainment, parking lots, hotel, motel, lodging house, common victualler, class 1, 2, and 3 motor vehicle, and automatic amusement device for 2024 as issued by the select board.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have a vote, 500. Next item on new business is the vote to open the spring 2024 town meeting warrant. Jim, do you have any updates on this or anything to add?
No, just that we're probably going to be looking to close it in late January. Eve and I, 23rd, and we already have a drafted warrant, and we have, probably 12, 14 articles already drafted, set to go, pretty standard stuff, cable appropriation budget, in-year budget adjustment, water and sewer, but we already have a boilerplate all set up, ready to go, so.
Okay, any questions from the board? Ben?
I'd make a motion to open the spring 2024 town meeting warrant and close it on January 23rd.
All those in favor?
2025.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have a vote, 500. And the next item is our consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent items as listed on the November 7th agenda.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have a vote 500. Jim, do you have an update?
Yeah, just a few items here, mostly budget-related. FY '25 budgets, the department heads are set to turn those in by the end of this week. I'm anticipating Anne Marie, Lisa, and Jody will take about a week or two to go through, fix any issues that might have come up. I probably will start working on the budget the week after Thanksgiving, and I'll know a lot more after that. We're hoping to have a balanced budget earlier than what we've done in the past, so maybe before Christmas or just around then. Finance Committee set to meet with Select Board next week to go over DPW and public safety budgets on Thursday the 16th. We're going to meet in the police station because all the rooms are booked here, so just keep that in mind. And on the 28th of the month, we're going to be meeting with FinCom and School Committee with a 6 p.m. tour of the new building, and then we're going to meet next door in the old middle school. That's it.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Jim? No?
I guess one quick thing, Route 1A and the asphalt, are they going to get that done this year?
Carl's shaking his head no.
No? Okay.
You don't want to come up, Carl?
Good evening once again. No, they've called off for various reasons. I was against putting it in. I was afraid that it would be too hasty and that things would have to be uncovered again and that we'd end up with a patchwork quilt. But for various reasons, they've decided not to do it. It was getting too late to the season. The subs couldn't get, there's an awful lot of covers that would need to be raised. And there are other work. There's work near the Norwood Town Line that's going to proceed. There's an old stone culvert down there that they skipped over, and it's going to get replaced with a new pipe starting the late afternoon on November 12th. So there are various reasons why it didn't go forward, but it won't happen this year. But of course, it'll be on schedule next year.
How are the conditions of 1A at this point before the winter then? I know last year it was very shaky and very difficult for our plows, our fire trucks. Is there an improvement?
Well, if you recall...
I don't drive it very often.
That may be a smart move. Last year, in early December, they did a leveling coat over the whole road, or most of it, and to smooth it out because it was in such rough shape. They have been in the process of touching it up. You'll notice that there are asphalt patches as you go into the, or transitions as you go into the driveway. They were short, they've lengthened them. They're getting it ready to be put away for the winter. They'll work as long as they can, but they're getting ready. And I know when you drive down, you feel a lot of manholes and whatnot, and there's different things with that. But, you know, they're in the process of trying to tidy that up and get it ready for the winter. So anyway,
I actually think it's okay. I actually like the idea of having the winter to continue settling and things like that. And my only concern would be, as Ally has already alluded, that if the road starts to deteriorate, they're going to they have a leveling engineer that's paying attention to that.
Well, yeah, they are, and that's been discussed at LS. Every 2 weeks we have a job meeting, and that was discussed, the whole issue of trying to get that buttoned up. And, you know, we're going to have a few more issues to talk about. I can't remember when the next meeting is. We didn't have one this week, so it's probably next week. So we're going to once again review different things. We got a complaint about a high cover recently and whatnot. So whatever we hear in there, we bring into the meetings, and hopefully we can get some cooperation with the DOT, the resident engineer, and the contractor to take care of this thing and get it set up. You know, the other big thing is we're not going to have a signal at North Street this
I was just going to ask you that. So they're not going to do that this year?
No, it isn't, for various reasons they have problems with. There's a very big, the mast arms going to the ground in a location. They're having trouble with the soil, shall we say.
Okay.
So anyway, and there are other places where they still need to do some digging. So it's not ready for finish coat yet. And we'll try and look after this and get it buttoned up as well as it can be for the winter.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, if there's nothing else for this evening, Ben,
I would make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have a vote, 500. We are adjourned.